Okay, Red Nail Energy listeners, I am so excited for this guest today. I'm having a little bit of a starstruck moment because I can hands down say this is my favorite artist in the world. So I'm just full circle moment. Already getting emotional. This is a great start. So to intro Sam Rueter is a multidisciplinary artist who explores the hidden narratives of the bodily facade, unveiling the unconscious patterns that define our existence. Born and raised just north of New York City, Sam is currently living and working in Charleston, South Carolina. Welcome to the podcast, Sam.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. Congrats.
Thank you.
Amazing. This is
Thank
amazing.
you.
I listened to your first episode today and I was like, wow, we are on so many of the same levels.
Yes.
Crazy.
It's so crazy. And I think that's why I felt so connected to your art, because so many of the things that you're able to put into a visual imagery that I just am so in awe of, because I can draw stick figures, but that's about as far as my artistic ability goes. But then coupled with the writing, which is what I connect with so much, I feel like it brings your art to life in a way that I just haven't experienced with that medium. So yeah, so inspired by you, and especially your Substack, which everyone should subscribe to. You get to know you on such a deeper level, and I feel like you have such a way of just making people feel at home and like a friend so easily. So
wow, thank you so much.
Welcome. Well, I'd love to kind of just dive in and talk a little bit about your early days with discovering art. I did see a Father's Day post. It looks like your dad might also be an artist. So I would love to hear a little bit about that and just kind of how you found your way when it came to becoming an artist and eventually deciding to take the leap and do it full time.
Yeah, sure. Wow. So I feel like everything, it's this very complex web of domino effects and tiny minuscule decisions that we're making throughout our life. And then one day you wake up and you're like, how did I get here? This is kind of crazy. And there is this notion that a lot of successful people have a life plan from the moment that they're a teenager, and they stick to it and they end up there. And there are people that do that.
Mm-hmm.
I am not one of them. I am not one of them. This was never my plan. And a lot of people in my life growing up, it was never told that I could do this, or it was never actually encouraged, which is kind of funny because my dad did go to art school, like me, and it was a different time. So that transition was kind of much more difficult. There wasn't as much opportunity, especially in a small town, not living in New York City anymore. So I've always been pushed to take the very safe route. And I think that's part of being a parent, part of like, you want to protect your kids, you want to make sure they're okay in the world. And a lot of people being okay in the world does not mean being a painter. So it kind of unfolded in a really natural way, but also in a way where I had a lot of blow up moments in my life, a lot of abrupt endings, a lot of rock bottoms that have kind of led me to this exact moment. So I did go to school for art, but I got a dual major because that was my parents' agreement. You can only take out student loans if you're going to do the thing that is safe, which is become an art teacher. So I got a fine arts degree with an education degree. Okay. And I was doing that for a very long time. And life was just I was not fulfilled. I was exhausted. And I always consider that my life didn't really start until I moved to Charleston, because that's when things broke open and I had no choice other than to really look at my life and look at myself and like bring myself back to the table again. And yeah, once I moved here, things started happening and I was not able to stay in a teaching career because the pay was so low. So it actually forced me out of it. And when I was listening to your first episode today, I was listening to you talk about how you had this life plan and you were like, okay, I'm going to have A, B, and C set up before I leave and do this crazy thing. And then the world was like, that's hilarious. No, you're going to go now. And that was kind of my moment there. It was like, no, you don't have a choice. And I was like, okay, what do I do? This was what I was supposed to do. And I was forced to kind of go back into food and beverage and all these odd end jobs. But because of that, I had free time. I wasn't lesson planning anymore. And I just started naturally painting again. And it was this escape for me from this very like transitional part of my life where I was very confused as to what I wanted and what I was supposed to do with my life. And I was engaged, I was in a relationship that was not fulfilling or safe to me. And painting was my safe space. It was this little world that I created where everything made sense to me. And I just kind of was able to free fall into that. And ever since, nothing's been the same.
Wow. It's so remarkable how often you hear that same repeated sentiment of it almost feels like you have no choice. And it's so scary because it does feel like everything's falling apart. But I've started to almost, this is so sadistic, like get excited when things in my life feel like they're falling apart, because I've learned over and over and over, and that trust muscle has gotten stronger, that there's something behind the scenes that's coming together. And all I have to do is learn how to release and let go of control. And then it's like, wait a second, why didn't I do this a year ago or 5 years ago? You know, but it's just cool to hear that universal theme that it feels like a lot of people have experienced, and that unfortunately a lot of people don't ever release, and they force themselves to stay in the relationship that's not safe, and they find these minor escapes. Maybe it's with a substance, maybe it's with painting, but it's like in this tiny little vessel of their life, and the rest of their life feels like a trap.
Yes.
And for me, that is where I am not interested in waking up into a life that I'm trying to escape from. Oof. It's like, how can life be something that I want to come home to and exist within? So
that is, I could not word that any better. And I think the pandemic was really interesting because it forced a lot of people to realize that it doesn't matter how much you think you're in control, you're not. I mean, I had friends lose jobs that had such job security, that had never really had to deal with a free fall before. And I had so many conversations with friends of, they're like, this is what you feel like all the time. This is terrifying. How do you deal with this? And I'm like, but no one has security. No one has ultimate control over their life. And the more we can practice surrender, the easier life gets. It's not always just like this banging your head against a wall, trying to manipulate and control every aspect of your life.
Yeah, I ask myself often when it does feel like I'm at kind of one of those moments, what would it feel like if I let go? And obviously the first feeling is it's scary and there's loss and there's grief, but every time I continue that thought, it's like, oh, it would feel so much better, because holding on and white knuckling is exhausting, especially if we really trust in what's happening, when we let go, the right things don't flutter away. The only things that fall away are the things that weren't really meant to be kept, maybe longer than the season that they were meant to be in our lives. And so again, easier said than done, but also easier to let go than to keep holding on often.
Absolutely. And like you said, I like the trust muscle aspect of that, because it really is. I mean, you'll have this big awakening, rock bottom moment, right? And hopefully we only have a few of those in our lives, but they become less intense and less invasive and less like, I feel like I'm never going to recover from this, because you trust yourself. You're like, okay, that's okay. I've got us. I can handle this. Absolutely. That's really important.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even as I've navigated relationships in a little bit more of a secure space, especially romantic and intimate relationships, I never used to understand when people that were in really happy relationships would say, I love them so much. And I also would, if something were to happen, or if something were to maybe change my perception of the relationship or who they are, I'd still be okay. And this like inner child in me was like, no, the love of your life isn't who you can live with. It's who you can't live without. And you should have to go to the ends of the earth to be with them. And it's really interesting to be in a place now where I do have such a strong trust muscle that if things shift a little bit, I'm like, let's just let it go and see what happens, and let's release and allow it to be. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, especially knowing now that you seem to be in a relationship that feels safe and that is a safe space for you. You're not trying to escape from. How did that transition happen, and how have you learned to find safety in intimacy? Because that can be something it's really scary.
That is tricky. Brie and I talk about this all the time. I am convinced that I have a belief that like a spiritual belief that we are put on this earth with like one lesson that we need to really learn. And I think intimacy in relationships is my one lesson that the universe is like, you need to figure this out, break your patterns, break the cycles. It has been the most triggering and the most painful part of my life, but also the most fulfilling and the most filled with growth, especially right now. I don't think I could have never imagined that I would be here with intimacy in the way that I am. I have a lot of complex trauma from intimate relationships with men, and I never really realized it until, like I said, this breaking open in Charleston kind of forced me to look at myself and look at my life. I was so disconnected from my body and my life that I wasn't a part of it. I was just floating along, and I wrote about this recently in my Substack. I feel like as young women, a lot of us are conditioned to just care about being chosen by men. Like, it's not about, is this safe for me? Is this right for me? Is this fulfilling for me? It's, I'm being chosen. That needs to be good enough. I mean, what are you complaining about? At least you got picked. At least you're not alone. And growing up with that story, if you really internalize it, it puts you in really unsafe situations, and your self-worth just deteriorates, and you find yourself in this place where you're like, whoa, how did I get here? And it's very disorienting. And I think another thing you mentioned on your first episode, was talking about like that scream in the back of your head. And you were talking about it with a job, but I feel that so much with the last like big relationship I left. It was years of me knowing this is not okay. I mean, from the moment I met him, I knew it was not okay. I knew I was making unsafe decisions, and I blew past all of the warning signs. And sometimes there is this part of your life where you are not ready to acknowledge things until you're ready, until that scream in your head is so loud that you can no longer stand it. And you're like, okay, this is it. I can't do this anymore. And I'm fortunate enough that I was able to recover my life. I was able to get my life back, and I'm starting to get my sense of self back. And I've been fortunate because I have people around me that are super supportive, and a lot of women around me that have been very supportive in that healing relationship. But it's so complex and it's so nuanced. And as a woman, if you're in your 30s and you're not married and you're leaving a relationship because in your bones it's not okay and it's not right for you, the rest of the world is looking at you like, are you insane? Do you realize you're going to be alone forever?
But you were chosen. You're supposed to be so happy that you were chosen. Yeah.
Like, you should just be happy that you were chosen. You're in your 30s. Are you insane? You might not get picked ever again. And it's this gross, harmful narrative that lives in our head because everyone is feeding it to us. And we just really have to be aware of it and be careful. It's so hard. It's so
and pose the question, what would it feel like to choose myself? I think that's the thing in all of it, is that part of my universal lesson has been that love is something that's so performative for me, and I can figure out how to be picked by anyone. It feels like a superpower. Anyone. But then it's like, oh, but wait, I never asked if I want to choose this person. I also never considered that I'm abandoning myself to get chosen. I'm now, for me, the scream of the deep knowing, it's my subconscious where it'll wake me up in the middle of the night or right when my alarm goes off, and my eyes will open, and in my head it's like, get away from this. It's the first feeling I would feel, and it's wild. Or I get up to go to the bathroom and it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I would be able to talk myself out of that or logic my way out of that. And then it's like more time passes. And I mean, our bodies know before we're often ready to. It's just crazy. And it's something that I think, again, I have such a soft spot in my heart for those former versions of myself that just needed to be chosen But now it feels so empowering to ask myself, do I want to choose this?
Yes.
I mean,
there's nothing like it. And the idea of choosing yourself over, it wasn't even an option for us when we were younger. Like, our young brains didn't even know that that was an option. And I was writing about this the other day, about how I have a vivid memory of being 21, and I had just ended like this 3-year relationship from college, probably like 6 months before this. And I was on my way to see this new guy who I would later be engaged to. And my foot was tapping the brake as I was passing my ex-boyfriend's exit. Like, don't do it. Don't go there. And I was stuck in this place of, my 21-year-old mind was like, we need to pick one. Which one is it? Like, which life am I going to? And the third option never occurred to me as a 21-year-old, that it could be me.
Right.
I didn't need either of those options. Neither of them were good. Neither of them were safe. It was literally like, no, you can't be alone. You're going to die if you choose yourself. And it's just, I'm grateful that I even had that realization late in life. Like, I could have never had it at all, you know?
Yeah. And you won't have all the things that the world has told you you need to have in order to be acceptable even in our society. And I do feel so fortunate that there seems to be more conversation around and more of a trend toward figuring it out for yourself, and maybe not having everything on paper that looks the way it's supposed to, but actually living a life that feels good on the inside. And it can be so confronting because we are told as women, like, be barefoot and pregnant at 25 and have these things and do these things in this specific order. And sometimes even being, 34 right now, not married, no children, those are things that I desire down the road, but I'm even just now feeling like I would be ready for that. I think had I done that when I was engaged previously too, called a wedding off at 26. And it's like, had I done what I thought I was supposed to do then, and, have this person begging on their knees for me to just go through with it all, it was like this moment of total loosening of the reins, dropping everything around me that I was told I'm supposed to want, and saying, but like, that doesn't feel right in my body. And I have abandoned my body and been able to dissociate in every other situation, but I'm tired of doing that, because where can we be safe if we're not safe in our own bodies?
There's no place. There's nowhere for us. And it's very sad that as a woman, you are living your life thinking there's just no place for me. There's nowhere for me to be in my body. There's nowhere for me to be present in my life. Oh, it's so heartbreaking, and it is so confronting. And there are so many past selves that I've had to grieve, and the idea of what I thought my life would look like you grieve that. That is a deep grieving process, and it doesn't just happen overnight. I mean, it's years and years of conditioning. And I still have days where I'm like, whoa, what, and everybody sees on social media, it's like this highlight reel of all these things. And it's like, no, I have doubts about the choices I've made. I've had, not about leaving, toxic relationships and stuff, but everybody questions if they've chosen the right path. And am I getting too old? Am I doing this? And there's all this societal fear embedded in our body, and it takes a lot to unwind.
And the amount of times that the invitation to just go back to the familiarity of what we should be doing, and having had childhoods where maybe you just wanted that stability and security. So it's like, okay, well, if I just choose this path, it seems like that's what a lot of people around me are doing. However, when we sit around the brunch table, it's an hour of people complaining about the lives they wish they could get away from. And so it's also difficult because, I'm this old spinster to these people, and there must be something wrong with me. And when they run into me, it's like, are you married yet? And, oh, honey, it'll happen for you someday. And I'm like, maybe we should start asking each other if we're happy. Yeah, that there's so many other things I've accomplished. And again, it's not a peacocking contest of what I've done, but at the same time, there's so many other things that I've learned to actually hold my worth within. And that feels so empowering. But beyond that, what a different world we would have if, when we ran into each other, we asked in all honesty and authenticity, are you happy? Or, and that's all that really matters. It doesn't matter what it looks like to the world, as long as it's a life that you are not waking up with that siren in your mind of like, get away, or driving to where your exit is, and in your head, it's keep going. I mean, those are the things that I think start as little tiny pings and eventually become inflammation and disease in our body because we're not listening to them.
Yep. And
So,
we're not taught about our intuition. We're like, and I have so many moments in my young life where I had glaring alarms going off, and in my body I was like, what is that? It was so unfamiliar and strange, and looking back I'm like, that was my intuition. My body knew this whole time, but I was not connected to it. There's no way to process that when you're not aware that it's happening.
Yeah. And as you said, there's just so much compassion for those former versions, and even just sadness. I mean, I just want to like hold her and be like, it doesn't have to be like this. But when we're told by everyone around us that it does, and it's like, no, just keep doing the thing. This is the right thing. Keep making sure you're building the strongest safety net, and that's what you're using your hands for. Don't be creating, don't be listening to your intuition, just build the safety net. And I'm like, but what if the safety net is my nightmare and I don't want to live in the safety net, you know? But it's just, I think that it takes so much time and healing and patience and grace for ourselves. And that's where I think that no matter who's listening and where you find yourself while you're listening, it's never too late. Because that's the other thing. I think we subscribe to this narrative that like, well, I've just chosen this, so I have to keep choosing
I have to follow it. Yep.
Yes. And it's like, no. And it also doesn't have to mean blow your life up. That's what I have to do, because that's just how I operate. And so for me, that is what I have to do often. But I think there are really small changes and ways that we can start slowly listening to our intuition, or asking ourselves those questions to be able to be safe in our own bodies. And and that is what is like the first domino that ends up creating such an effect in our lives.
Absolutely. And through that healing process of like, you know, you're getting emotional and I'm getting goosebumps listening to you talk about like holding space for that sadness and that grief of like that poor girl. You also have to heal all of the gaslighting that has been happening in your mind. Everyone in the world, the whole world is gaslighting you that what you're feeling is not real. Like, no, you're not feeling fulfilled. You're depressed. You're anxious. That's not real. Because if you have a husband, if you have a house, if you have a baby, that means you're happy. So all of the things you're feeling are irrelevant. And when you are just built, your life is built around that form of gaslighting, you stop listening to yourself. You don't believe what you're feeling anymore. That doesn't just change overnight. That is so complex.
Yeah. And to then take it a step further, which I would love to kind of dive into as well, you then have physical manifestations of these things happening, and you seek actual medical guidance and attention that only further tells you you're crazy. This is in your head. I mean, in high school, I had so many GI issues, and the amount of doctors that would say it's psychosomatic. She just needs to be less stressed. She just needs to it's in her head. And then I would have imaging that would actually counteract that. And there was something going on with me physically. But when the doctors are saying that it's not, the high schooler's the crazy one, you know, automatically, like we're the ones that now can't trust our feelings, can't trust our symptoms, can't trust our bodies. I mean, it just continues to perpetuate that notion that like we are safe nowhere. And even if you ask the professional for help on something that is a very real physical symptom, you're still crazy. You know? Which, yeah, I mean, I know that you've had a very recent, and then it sounds like even throughout your life, experiences when it comes to endometriosis and some of the physical manifestations of those feelings that I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about your journey there.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so true. It all compounds, right? All of this gaslighting from all these different areas, it just compounds. And then you're left feeling just not at home in your own body. You're like, oh, my reality is I'm not real. It's not even, it doesn't even become about your reality. It's like, I'm invisible. I'm not a real human. The world doesn't see me. There's nothing to me. I mean, how depressing is that? It's so sad. It breaks my heart. And I'm so sorry to hear about all of your GI issues. That is so stressful. And especially as a young kid, you're looking up to, all of these people in our lives, like doctors and police officers, were taught as little kids, like, these are the good guys. These are the guys that are looking out for you. And you're there as this very vulnerable kid being like, something's wrong, please help me. And it's damaging. I mean, the medical, it's a lot. I also had a lot of GI issues when I was in college. And it got to the point when I was like 18 that I couldn't keep food or water down. And I remember my mom kept bringing me to the doctor, kept bringing me to the ER, and they were like, she's anxious. And I remember sitting on the table. I hadn't had food for 2 days and I was biting my nails. I'm a chronic nail biter. And the doctor comes in and he takes one look at me and he said, she has a nail biting habit. And my mom said, okay. And he said, well, clearly she has chronic anxiety. She's making herself sick. And I just remember feeling like it was all my fault. Like, oh my God, this is how embarrassing is this? Like,
I'm causing this.
It's me. And now everyone in this room knows that I'm wasting their time, that I'm a loser, that I can't keep my emotions under control. Again, being shamed for your emotions. And then within a week, my mom pushed for imaging and I had a tumor the size of 2 softballs pressing on all of my internal organs. I had to go into emergency surgery. It was like a 13.5-hour surgery. It was insanely invasive and painful and awful. And I just remember thinking like, I wonder if that doctor is going to apologize to me or say, I'm so sorry that I got that wrong. And it just was this other event in my life where I was forced to just kind of like, everyone around me seemed like it was normal. Like it was like, oh, this is tragic, but you're fine now. So it's okay. So again, it was just like this, pick myself up. I'm going to be fine. The surgery's over. I'm good.
And almost in that moment, still in the narrative of being like chosen or picked, wanting validation from this person that had, stepped on you and stifled you and pushed you down to see you, like wanting to just be seen and then still not being seen, even though you had like the most mega reason to be seen in the world.
Yes, absolutely. It just feeds, all of the narratives feed into each other. And since then, my health has been, I developed hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's after that because the surgery was, I was in ICU for 2 weeks after that. It was super intense on my body. But I've never considered myself a chronically ill person because I've never let it stop me from doing things. I've just kind of like pushed through, kept going, pushed through, disassociate. I'm in pain. I'm tired. Too bad. Going to keep hustling. This is how the world works. It was just not, being sick isn't efficient.
No, and it's not sustainable. That's the thing too. It dominoes as well, because if your internal system is not well and you're not able to treat that root cause, which sometimes it is deeper, unresolved emotional trauma, of course, but being told you're just anxious and you're biting your nails and that's what's causing all of this is also so unhelpful, because it's like, well, then let's address this deeper narrative of societal gaslighting that is telling me that my body's not safe and I'm creating this lack of safety within myself, but there's nothing I can do about it except maybe take a slew of medications that are actually only going to make me feel worse in the long run. It's crazy.
Absolutely. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I think about, I had my appendix ruptured last September, as a lot of you probably know, because I feel like it's all I talk about.
Yeah.
Now.
But I even remember with that, in your stage of healing and being in such a more secure spot, still going, it's in my head, I'm probably fine. It might be that, like, almost being forced to go seek medical attention. And to compound that even further, I can't pay for this because in America, no one really can pay for our healthcare. It's insane. Yeah.
I was so ill. I was thankfully visiting my parents back home for my mom's birthday. And that ultimately saved my life, because if I was alone here in my apartment, I would not have gone to the ER, because I have been chronically dismissed by doctors over and over that nothing is wrong. And I had convinced myself that it was gas pain. I had convinced myself that I had a tummy ache. Okay. I was like, I am not going to waste everyone's time. I could not even sit up. I was doubled over, vomiting, everything up. I couldn't even sit up. It was so painful. And I was like, this is going to pass. And finally, my mom was like, no, like something is severely wrong. And when we got there, I just remember being so embarrassed that they had to get a wheelchair for me and like physically put me in this wheelchair. And I just remember being humiliated. Like, I'm going to go in there not be able to walk, and they're gonna scan my belly and be like, you have a gas bubble and I am going to want to die. I was so humiliated and terrified for myself. And yeah, they were like, oh, you know, there is a stomach virus going around, I'm sure it's that. Like, that was the first comment made to me by one of the nurses. Like, it was immediately dismissed. I'm writhing in pain and I'm trying to like hold back tears because I'm embarrassed that I'm crying. Again, women showing their emotions, like, what's more shameful than showing emotion? And when they finally came in and did the ultrasound on my belly, I remember the doctor being like, oh God, what is that? And I just remember looking at him like, I don't know what do you mean? What is it? And he's like, we need to operate ASAP, your appendix burst. And in that moment, it was such a release for me because my pain became real. And my life became real and my body became real. It was like, oh my God. And I just remember my mom was like so upset and was like, oh God, like, you have to go into emergency surgery. Are you going to be okay? Like, very anxious about the whole thing. And I was so calm. I like this calmness washed over me.
Finally.
Yes.
Finally, I'm here, I'm real, I exist.
I'm a real person in the world. Someone is saying that my experience is real. And it wasn't even about the appendix at that point. It was about all of these things that had happened to me that everybody ignored my whole life. That doctor, I have such a soft place in my heart for him because he held my hand and he was like, no, this is not okay. And I'm so sorry. Like, we're going to make it better. And it was very traumatic, but also so healing at the same time.
Wow. Holy cow. And then since then, I mean, it seems like you've been on kind of advocating for yourself when it comes to figuring out internally what you need to do in order to heal. How are you feeling now? How has it been in the last, few months of discovery?
Yeah, I've always had really painful periods. I've always had a really hard time emotionally around my period. I have these like drop-offs emotionally, and I've just navigated it my whole life. I've worked my whole life around it. I've gone to doctors and tried to be tested for PCOS and endometriosis. Everybody tells me, you don't have that. That's not a thing that exists. And luckily for me, my mom works in the medical field and she was an advocate for me that day. And before I was wheeled into surgery, she pulled the surgeon aside and said, can you please look around while you're in there and see if there's anything going on? Like, she has bad chronic pain. And sure enough, like, he wasn't able to like do a full deep dive or anything, but he was able to diagnose me with endometriosis. He's like, she has a big endometrioma on her one ovary, and she has it all over her uterus. And that was like one of the first things that I remember like waking up is my mom was like, you were right. I was like, what do you mean I was right? Like, it was this whole other gift inside of this really fucked up and hard experience. It was this whole like, no, like, you're right. You were right. And by this point, I had let that go. I was like so used to navigating my life around my pain and all of these things that I wasn't even expecting resolution there. But it has been really hard because since that surgery, my body's not the same. My body's severely inflamed, and I don't know if just the invasiveness of that surgery, my endo symptoms are the worst they've ever been. And I've lost like my whole quality of life. And it's been a big change for me, and also really opened my eyes to like, this is what chronic illness is. This is the reality of what people are dealing with. Like, you don't have a choice. It stops you in your tracks. And trying to learn more about the psychological aspect of pain now, because you and I are seekers. We got to know the ins and outs of everything. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing everything I can for my physical pain. It's not really getting that much better. I've got to find a way to figure it out. So what is the psychological, what is pain? Like, how does the brain create pain and process pain? And I've been going down that route, and it's been allowing me to feel a little more in control and more helpful, like hopeful, because it's making me realize like, it's because my nervous system has been attacked so many times that now my brain is lighting up easier. I'm more sensitive. My body is like, oh God, what's going to happen? We need more inflammation, more alarm bells going off. And I do feel a little more in control in this new line of research of like, I think I can make this work, and I think I can get my quality of life back. But it's a daunting process if you don't have advocates, and if you don't have the energy. It is a full-time job being chronically ill, and then you have to advocate for yourself on top of it and research for yourself on top of it. It is exhausting. And I wish there were more programs out there for chronically ill women, especially because women are like 90% of chronically ill people in this country.
Right. Yeah. And to then look at it like, well, it must just be all of them. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what's so crazy is I think part of it too is that you've spent how many years walking this path away from trust, away from security, away from stability. And so not only do you have to turn around and walk that whole path back, but it's not just like a paved path that is ready for you with open arms. It's a lot of hurdles, and it's a lot of unlearning and deeply figuring out what that trust in your own body feels like, because you can't just walk in somewhere with a medical professional that should be able to tell you exactly what's going on or help you find that healing. And so there is a lot to dodge, but I think it's almost like there's two sides to that coin. And the first side of it is really just unknowing, being chronically ill, feeling helpless to that. And then the other side of it is that hope and saying it is possible to heal. It is possible to recover. My subconscious and my brain has to see to believe that. So I need to recognize like, it doesn't have to be like this forever, but it's also not just going to magically be better overnight, which is infuriating because when you've spent so many years feeling sick, you just want to feel better. But I think that there's so much hope and so much importance in sharing those stories and like how to stay the course and things that you found that might be small. I mean, I know you've been doing a big elimination diet. So the little wins of, first of all, feeling better. And then second of all, getting to re-enter food and maybe form a new relationship with food, nourishing your body and healing your body, and things that, again, as women, we've learned to weaponize and villainize. And it's only about what your body looks like, not how it works for you or what it can do for you. Food is supposed to just be eaten to make sure you're staying skinny and you're restricting and you're not allowing. So it's so layered and nuanced in all these ways that we've abandoned ourselves to be what the world wants us to be.
Absolutely. And I am so aware that because of my bodily disassociation and because of all the trauma that has happened to my body, there is no way that I am not paying for that somehow, right? Like, I understand that on a cellular level, my body has stored so much of that. And because I am just now looking at it, I'm hopefully going to be able to heal it and pause and be like, okay, this being the girl that can push through everything, there's no reward at the end of that. There's only illness, there's only dis-ease, right? But there's also this nuance of, I also don't want to get to the point where I am blaming myself and adding more shame to the narrative of, well, you created that dis-ease in your body. I mean, I can't even tell you how many people I had conversations with after my appendectomy that they were like, what about the energetics in your life? Do you feel that this, what were you storing in your body? And it's like,
what other ways could this be your fault?
Yes. And it's like, I get that. And I understand that you're trying to be helpful. And I do know there are science-backed things that prove that this is happening. But in those moments, you are sometimes only adding shame to someone else's like pile of foundation that they are trying to break down, and be like, no, I am capable of healing my body and my life. And so it is this like fine balance between the two beliefs.
Yeah, 100%. And I think just learning to instead recognize how we can place blame on all these things around us that maybe we allowed. We maybe didn't have boundaries. I've always heard, if you aren't willing to say no to something that's not right for you, your body will learn how to say no. And so there's, and it's just remarkable where you can release the shame of it being your fault and instead feel so empowered by the fact that you get to actually listen when your body is telling you things, when your intuition is telling you things. And that alone is a lifelong process, I think. But there is empowerment in that, in a sense of, I have so much grace and compassion for that version of myself that had no idea how to advocate for herself or say no to things or set boundaries. And that now I get to be in control, and I actually do get to be in the driver's seat, where before maybe there was all these other narratives that were driving this car and it wasn't working. Clearly, all the wheels are falling off and no one's getting anywhere safely. And
yeah. And I think having compassion for the fact that our younger selves did the right thing. Like, looking back, it can be shameful to be like, wow, I abused alcohol to stay away from my body because everything was too painful. And that's so shameful for me. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. Like, why would younger me do that? This is like, I need to cover that up and act like it didn't happen. But it's like, younger me I was doing the right thing. I wasn't safe in my body. My body was trying to protect me. My brain was like, this is not okay. We need to get out of here. So here's this substance for you to use because that's going to get us there the quickest. And technically that's our body doing its job, just with the wrong tools, you know?
And also sometimes it's not even the right thing. It's the only thing. It was what we had to do to survive. Yes. And so there is an aspect with that too of, I'm so guilty of like, well, I should have known better, or I wish I would have left this situation earlier, or done that earlier. And that is another channel in our brain that has no space in my mind anymore. I change that channel automatically because, again, it's like, why don't I just pour more shame salt on this wound? Like it's not helpful. And so learning instead to go, oh my gosh, I feel so sad for that version of myself that was the only choice at the time. And I'm so thankful that that is not the only choice that I have now. You know, that can be empowering too.
Yeah, I can show her that that's not what we need to do now. And I can show my future self that I'm showing up for her in a way that's productive and helpful. I love that.
Yes, me too. Okay, I'm so excited to continue this conversation. We're just going to take a super quick break to hear from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back with Sam.
Perfect.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the masculine relationship. One of my favorite pieces by you is called Mother Wound. I have it hanging in my living room. It spoke to me on so many levels. And I would love to hear a little bit about your relationship with the feminine and how that's kind of evolved over the years, and maybe some inspiration behind that piece. And then even some of the other pieces you've created that so beautifully show the imperfection of the feminine, the maybe not getting it right, but doing the best we can with what we have, and some of the pain, but also forgiveness that kind of has to occur in healing that relationship with our own feminine.
Oh yeah. I feel like this stems back to being the cool girl, right? We are conditioned to be the guy's girl in order to stay safe. A lot of us in our lives growing up. And I was that girl for a very long time. And I was a girl that hated pink. I was a girl that did not wear makeup. I was a girl that did not do my hair or have nails or any of these things that were attributed to the feminine, because the feminine was weak. The feminine was uncool. The feminine was unsafe. It was not even an option in my head ever. And you grow up and become so rooted in your masculine energy, and it closes off your heart and it closes off your creative force, and it doesn't allow any room for any healing or any vulnerability whatsoever. And I just, in this awakening of leaving that 7-year relationship, that engagement, I realized how closed off I had been with everyone around me and myself. And I had to survive, right? It's a survival tactic, but I realized that there was so much more to life than just being this facade of myself, and researching the feminine and the masculine and all of those things. And I do believe gender is a construct, right? I think that these energies exist in all of us and it's different for everybody, but the feminine did not exist in my life at all for so long. And same with my familial conditioning. It's just, it all goes back to girls are weaker, and you don't want to be a girl. You don't want to be associated with a girl. You're going to grow up and play sports and you're going to hang out with the guys, and abandoning that is life's work. It feels confusing because then you peel it all back and you're like, but wait, where am I? Do I exist? Is there a self in here? And I love attributing this whole last year and a half, like watching Taylor Swift bring this insane cult-like energy to the world, where women are embracing their little inner child again. And for many of us, it's what we never got to have. Like, it was not cool to like Barbie or Taylor Swift when we were growing up. It was chronically uncool you were ostracized, you were, that's so weird, grow up. It was not, you were not allowed to do it. And if you were allowed to do it, you're bolder and more brave than I was. I was not ever in that camp. I hid myself from all of it. And watching the world come together and make friendship bracelets and dress up and attend all these concerts, everybody is looking at it and some people are like, you know, this is crazy behavior. And it's like, no, but you're not understanding. It's bigger than Taylor Swift. This is alluding to the fact that all of us had our girlhood stripped away way too soon. And now we're getting to relive it no matter what age we are. And we're getting to go with the younger generations and see these young girls look up at their moms and look up at their older sisters and be like, wow, it's cool to be a girl. It's cool to be Taylor Swift. It's cool to be Barbie. And those are very like simplistic concepts, but I think it's so interesting. And I think it's such a revolution that's happening. And it's bigger than what we can really like see in this moment.
Yeah, it's creating, exactly as you said, such a movement and a safe space for our inner child, which there's so much compassion I have for that inner child that used to sit on the edge of my knee and look out at the world and drive the ship that I was just a slave to, saying, this is not safe, this is not safe, this is not safe. And the moment I was able to turn her around on my knee and look at her and say, oh, I've got you. We are safe. We're okay. We can take up space. We deserve to be here. It's been something that, especially in my 30s, I've learned to be more playful, be more curious about things, not worry so much about what it looks like on the outside, or as you said, how to be the cool girl, which is often making fun of the girls that are doing these things that are camaraderie and girlhood. And I just think it is so powerful. It's so much bigger than the understanding of this one artist that we all agree maybe doesn't have the best vocals in the world, but the lyrics speak to this part of our soul that we've just buried and buried and buried. And it's really universal, kind of simple things that we go, wait, you feel like that too? You had that experience too? And it's just so healing to recognize that. I think every woman in the world, whether they'll admit it or not, has had those experiences, and how healing it is to just be able to stand in a venue together and celebrate the fact that we're all the same in so many ways, when especially in a world and in a society that tries to divide and pin women against each other and be so competitive all the time. It's this thing of like, be the nice girl, but be better than everyone else. Don't be too pretty, but be pretty enough. Don't be too strong, but be strong. You know, it's so exhausting to try to navigate.
It is. It's never ending. And I have been thinking about this a lot, because it's, once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? But everyone's on their own journey with that. And women are going to come to this realization, or they're not. And it's going to be at different points of their lives. And it's moving generationally, but it's still slow to some areas. And I am not a perfect person, and I get very frustrated when I see harmful videos made by other women and harmful rhetoric coming from other women, where I'm like, how can you just want to take them by the shoulders and be like, how can you not see that you're perpetuating everything we're trying to break free here? But in the same instance, it's like we're all kind of like pointing the fingers at one another and perpetuating these harmful cycles. And you see women that make, you know, these trad-wide videos, or videos where they're like, if you like Taylor Swift, you're lame. And you know, these are grown women. And then the comments are dozens of women saying like, I hope he picks you, and what a pick me, and oh, good luck being a cool girl. And it's like, I understand we're trying to call out that behavior and ask people to do better. But also from that person's perspective, we are perpetuating the bullying that they believe women do to one another. Mm-hmm. They are coming from a standpoint of, the only safe place is to be the guy's girl. The only safe place is to be in the room with the men and pretend to be what they want me to be. Mm-hmm. And people attacking me for doing this is only just doubling down on this belief that other women are not safe. Other women are going to come for me. Other women are going to harm me. And other women are nasty and competitive. And it's just this really complex thing that social media is driving. And watching it from the outside, it's like, oh, what, you can't make other people see it. If it's not in their awareness, they have to come to it themselves. But perpetuating the harm that we're trying to put down is not helping either.
Yeah, there's a softness that has to occur, in a sense that there's even some women creators that I've been so enamored and inspired by, because when hate comes into their comment section, they actually just respond so lovingly and detached from it in this way that, like, my blood is boiling and they're like, oh my gosh, you're right, my hair did look kind of dumb today, whatever it is, where they just don't show up to the battle they're being invited to. And I think my relationship with the feminine, and especially my relationship with my mom, that has gotten so much stronger over the years, especially when I realized I don't have to show up to every battle I'm invited to. I think that in me is where the pit of that comes from, where the feminine is not safe because the feminine is against you and only one of you can win. And I think that there are times where it's like, oh no, but there is a way where we can all win. And there is a softness that is scary because it's vulnerable and it's showing flaws and it's not showing up having all the answers and being perfect. But there's this movement in ways I've seen that I really want to embody the best I can, where my first go-to is not defensiveness, and it is not, raise your voice louder or say the more hurtful thing or because that is the aspect of a wounded feminine that I'm really trying to release. And I recognize now it's possible to do so. And I think that is why the mother wound piece spoke to me so much, is because it's all of these women with their hands over the next person's eyes going, this is how it has to be. And when somebody just goes, oh, wait, no, it doesn't.
Wait a second.
It's, again, easier said than done, but it's so possible to kind of be the thing that breaks the cycle and change the ending. And while on one hand it feels like so much pressure, it actually feels like a lot more pressure to have hands over my eyes that I don't want to be there. And so there's been a lot of freedom in just accepting that it's up to me to really change the ending.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of empowerment in that. I think the generations before us, they had to deal with things that were different forms of difficulty, right? And our great-grandparents and our grandparents, they had different things that they had to go through that was their cycle breaking. And I like to think of it as us being the emotional cycle breakers now. This is our difficult task that we have to overcome. And it's empowering to think of it that way. And it's also very, very empowering to realize you're not going to do it all in one lifetime. It's impossible. You are not going to be a perfect person. And I know we feel very similar in the mother wound aspect. And I don't know how you feel about having children one day, but I often talk with my friends who also don't have kids yet. And it's always this big fear because our mother wound is so deep in us that we're going to perpetuate that cycle and keep it going. And I just want to be a voice for women out there, including myself. Like, remember, acknowledging that it exists is proof that you are not going to continue that harm. Like, you have seen it, you cannot unsee it, and you are not going to continue bringing that. You're not going to be perfect. There's no way for you to be perfect. You're not supposed to be, but you can't unsee it. And once you see it, you can bring your new healed self to these relationships. And if you have a child one day, there's no way you can perpetuate the harm because you're already aware of things that your mother was not aware of.
Yeah, you've shined light on the thing that is so scary, and that alone is the answer to it. I remember one time being in a therapy session, and again, just like you said, trying to find answers, trying to consume as much knowledge as I could. And I said to my therapist, do you think that maybe I'm actually a narcissist, but I just don't fully get it?
I've said the same thing. Did your therapist say the same thing about a narcissist does not question
the fact that you're saying that means you're not a narcissist? I was like, but make it make sense. Like, some of these things feel so hard for me. Maybe I'm actually the problem.
I'm the problem. It's me.
Yes, it's me. There we go. Taylor Swift. And she said, the fact that you're even asking me that could not make me more confident that you are not
a narcissist.
And of course we can pick up maybe patterns, or there's a lot of codependency in the feminine side of my family where that can look a certain way, the hypervigilance, I'm going to slam the cupboard and you better decode what's wrong. And so some of those things I think maybe could seem very selfish, which can pair so much. Like codependency and narcissism can look really similar.
Yes.
But I think, yeah, I'm just trying to find the answers here. And there's a side of it too that is scary and so liberating in just saying, you're just not ever going to be perfect, and you're not ever going to have it all figured out, and you're not ever going to have all the diagnoses and the answers and the things to make it so it does finally make sense. I think our human experience is living it out and having things just start to be revealed to us, and maybe we just understand it a little better. But there's also so much freedom in just being like, I just am who I am, and I'm lovable right now. I don't have to get to a point where I'm worthy of love. And I can just be loved and imperfect and still figuring it out and growing and all of the things and still be on my deathbed and have not figured it all out, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we need more of more eyes on the messiness of the in-between. Like that's what I'm most interested in. And I think as an artist, that's what I'm most interested in portraying, because it's like the world has enough of the perfect happy ending, but like the world has enough examples of that. I want to see you in those very vulnerable, raw, honest moments. Like, what does that look like? What does it look like for me? How can I portray that and connect to somebody else where they can look at a piece and be like, oh, that's my life. That's something that I feel. I didn't know anybody else ever felt like that. And I'm allowed to be a human. Like acknowledging humanness through art, it can save lives. I know it's saved mine, you know?
Yeah, it's this really crazy rat race where all of us are spending all of our time and energy trying to match the highlight reel of the person we think has it figured out, without recognizing that all of our in-between highlight reels probably looks the exact same. And there's so much more connectedness. Even somebody that I could never relate to when it comes to the way they live their life, what they look, all these things, the in-between is probably so much closer than I could ever imagine. And for me, there's so much relief in that, in knowing that even like Taylor Swift probably has the exact same bad day that we have, or the times where she goes, oh, so I really only have 7 days I feel normal in the month, and all the rest of the days I'm a raging lunatic. Like, you know, like these things that I feel like are so universal, yet we just really choose often to show up with, but here's my highlight, here's the flashy things, here's what I do have figured out, even though it's filtered and edited and actually isn't even reality. And so there's so much damage in that being what we witness. And then there's so much liberation and healing in realizing that we just can accept that's not even real. And all the in between is probably so similar amongst all of us.
So similar. And I co-own a women's retreat company with my best friends. And when we bring women together, it always amazes me, because we could have a 65-year-old woman and a 19-year-old woman, and these women are all in the same group, and we all feel the same. We're all experiencing the same emotions, the same self-doubt, the same shame, like all of these things that are the building blocks of our lives. And we're worlds apart in age and life experience, but we're sitting across from each other, looking each other in the eyes, holding space for one another and saying, oh my God, I see you, that's me. And there's something so healing about that. And I think the reason the world tries its best to keep women fighting with each other and in competition with one another is because if we were to all get in that same room and be able to look each other in the eye, the world would never be the same. There would be no hate, like everything would change. Like we are the alchemy to the world. Everything would change, and it would happen overnight. And I think that's why the world is so hell-bent on keeping us all apart.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better. There's so much empowerment that would occur simultaneously, and it does occur in those circles. And the work that you do in bringing women together is so important, because it could be the first time that some of those women have ever sat in a circle with other women and unclenched their fists and let their shoulders down and exhaled in this deep knowing that they are not alone. when, again, we've perpetuated the narrative that we are alone, trust no one, you know, especially women. They're going to, you know, stab you in the back with a smile on their face. And I think finding deep, nurturing female friendship has been the sole thing that has helped me recognize that unconditional love does exist. And it's been the thing that has then in turn allowed me to believe that maybe a romantic love could exist, because of the times that I've been held on, you know, my best friend's couch going through another breakup and another one bites the dust. And how many times, you know, am I like making a mockery of my own life, and maybe now being fearful to even share publicly if I'm dating someone, because what if it doesn't work out? And all those things that just, again, are so unfairly placed on us. And then it's been these women that have still loved me through that, and that have still held me through that, and that I've acted ugly and I've done things that I'm not proud of, and then held myself in that. And then the best friends that say, so I've already forgiven you, but you have to forgive you. And I think it's so powerful.
It is. And there's something to be said for female friendship is the most powerful act of love, in my opinion, because with other intimate relationships, like if you are heterosexual with men, like there's an intimate tie, there's an intimacy, there's a physical intimacy that is binding you together there, right? Even when things get a little rocky, like that's a thread throughout it. Female relationships, they don't have that. Like you're bound by nothing other than the deep willingness to understand each other and not turn away when you don't understand each other, and sit there and say, we are not on the same page right now, and you're hurting my feelings, but I'm going to sit here until we figure it out, until we understand each other, because I'm committed to understanding you. There's nothing else tethering you there. There's no outside societal like sticker that you're getting for having these deep, intimate female friendships. There's no marriage. There's no baby. There, like all of those things that we've been brought up to believe is going to make us feel fulfilled, like those are not coming from our female friendships. But this love that we are getting from those female friendships is transformative. There's been nothing like it in my life. And you talking about believing love exists because of those friendships, I couldn't agree more. I don't think I would be where I'm at with my boyfriend right now if I didn't have Bree and Lindsay and Rachel and Maddie and these women that have been that for me. Like they've gotten me to the place of safety that I didn't know existed, that I would have never made it to with a man. Like they were the prerequisite, essentially. They were the ones that were like, okay, we see you. You have been so harmed and you trust no one, and you don't even trust me, and you're going to lash out at me, and you're going to say harmful things, and you're going to let your ego get in the way, and you're going to do all these things, but it's okay. I'm going to stay here with you until we figure it out. And without that safety, I would have never been able to show up in a relationship with Luke, ever. There's no way. There's no conceivable way, because they taught me how to trust them, other people, and myself, you know?
Yeah, I mean, louder for the people in the back. I think that anyone that is so scared of letting someone close enough to get hurt is missing out on the deepest love that allows you to be loved when you feel unlovable. And I think that is what is so transformative, is it allows you to heal those deep protective self-preservative mechanisms, and then also know it doesn't matter what I face in life. It doesn't matter if another one bites the dust relationally. I have this foundation that is so solid, and I have these people that have been there through it all, and they've seen the highest highs and the lowest lows and still chosen to stay. And I mean, talk about being chosen. Like at the end of the day, I think being chosen by those relationships allowed me to not need to be chosen by a man and not need to be chosen. And then it's like, oh, I get to want to be with you, but I don't need you to choose me. I mean,
my desire matters, and I can use it accordingly, because I don't have that. You're not choosing out of fear. The fear is gone. They alleviate that fear. And it makes me emotional to think about, but it's like something in me healed when I looked at Brie one day and I said, oh my God, like I'm never going to be alone again. I'm never going to be alone again. And I feel like as women, we show up we fall into the arms of men that aren't right for us and that are harmful for us because we're so scared of being alone. We're so scared of just being this little old crazy lady with all her cats. And like, you know, it's this crazy narrative. And when you have those people in your life and you can look at them and you can be like, oh, my life fell apart again, but you're here. And that's all I need. And that's family. Like, that's irreplaceable. You can't get that anywhere else.
Yeah, no, you really can't. And it is something that, again, has become something that the internet loves to villainize and to show these harmful situations. But I would love to perpetuate the movement of the beauty and the depth within feminine energy that is, of course, like always still healing, but willing to show up soft and willing to show up imperfect and willing to be curious about why somebody may be responding the way that they are. And that translates then for me in a masculine energetic where I allow myself to show up a little bit softer. I allow myself to show up without my fists ready to battle, you know, and
Right.
I spent so much of my life in a masculine energy that the way through is always outward. And I'm finally coming to this space of like the way through is actually inward, and the way up in any direction we could ever go is within ourselves, and quieting everything around us and stripping away all the things that are telling us how it should be, and going, oh, I actually already have all the answers. Just give me a minute because I have to quiet the world, and then I can trust what I feel about whatever decision I want to make.
Yeah, absolutely. That was beautifully said.
Well, thank you. How has your own relationship with your feminine been able to show up, or what does that kind of softness look like for you when it comes to boundaries or just even your day to day?
Yeah, my whole life, I have been a boundaryless person. I have no idea what a boundary looks like. I'm still working on it. I actually, it's very funny. Last month, I was so burnt out because I feel like when you're an empath and you're really rooted in being hyper aware of everyone else in the world and how they feel, all you want to do is make people feel good and safe and seen because that's all you've ever wanted. So I feel like all I'm doing in the world is constantly monitoring everybody. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you need this. I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to, like, without anyone even asking. And I love it. And it fills me up. But when I don't have boundaries with it, I am so utterly depleted. And I got to that point last month where I was like, I have nothing left for myself. I'm exhausted. And I made a rule. I was like, I am going to say no to every single person that asked me for help for 1 month. That's it. And not in a cruel way, not in a way that's like, I hate you and am discarding your needs right now. And I sent out a 8-minute long voice memo to like my closest 20 people and said, listen, this has nothing to do with you. It's not a personal thing. It's a Sam problem. I have no boundaries and I'm exhausted and I'm so sorry, but I cannot respond to your text messages right now. I cannot come to your gathering right now. And I was terrified. I was like, everyone is going to hate me because I am the girl that shows up for people. Like, I can't just change my personality overnight. That's why they're friends with me. And I had this whole crisis of like, oh my God, these people are going to think I'm some terrible person. Every single person was like, oh, thank God. Like, we all wonder how you're not face down every single day. Like, please, what are you? Yes, absolutely. And it was this crazy relief of like, oh, I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to say no. I'm allowed to tell people that I'm tired. And just the support that I've had in that allowed me to just be soft and be, okay, I can rest. I can like come home after a long day of work and I don't have to like bake a cake for this person's gathering because, you know, whatever, X, Y, and Z. And it was so helpful. And I did only make it 2 weeks before I fell back into
out over here.
you know, like it's 2 weeks. And then life just got crazy again. And there were situations where I was like, okay, I have to help you do that. I have to, whatever. But it's a practice. And it's interesting to watch other people in your life that have solid boundaries, like Bree and Luke, the closest people to me. They know their boundaries so well. They know their energy levels so well. and it triggers the hell out of me.
Mhm.
It makes me enraged. Like, we will have plans to do something, or someone will bring something up, and then it's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Like, I don't have it. And I'm like, what do you mean? You have to have it. This person is moving across the country, and aren't you thinking about, like, I'm in full trigger mode of like, how dare you? But it's because I literally can't do that. I'm incapable of it. And I watch them do it, and they're always like, hey, do you realize that, like, you don't have this right now? Maybe. And they're so gentle about it. But it's so interesting that when you're this codependent person that's been trying to earn love your whole life, like, that is such a wound for me. I need to earn my love. I'm like, I can prove to you that I'm worthy of love. I can show you all of the ways that I'm going to be an amazing friend, an amazing partner, and like all of these ways. And it's exhausting. And neither of them operate that way. And so it's very interesting from the outside perspective to be like, I'm this ex-codependent, people-pleasing person, and witnessing you say no to people really triggers me. It really upsets me and makes me have to sit with myself and be like, why does that trigger me so much? Is it because I want to say no, but I'm not?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I think with that same notion of knowing that that's a superpower, to be able to always make other people feel whatever way almost that you want to make them feel better, understood, seen, all of these things. When it comes to the codependency aspect, the thing that I've started asking myself is the why behind what I'm doing. And oftentimes it's to control the way they view me. And it's not, I think it's, at first I didn't really understand, like,
it's manipulative.
It's manipulative. It's manipulative. It's calculated. And it's not, it's like, when I remember first kind of like chewing on that a little bit, where I'm like, but I'm not doing it to gain anything back. And it's like, oh, but I'm gaining control over how they view me, over my ability to where I take up space in their life. It's weird. It's like, the people that are the biggest like martyrs in my life of wanting, you know, my attention and all these different things are the ones that it would feel like such a weird loss to not have them call on me, even though every time I see their name pop up, I'm like, I don't want to deal with this. And so learning that within myself, like how, and that when we say no, the whole world doesn't fall apart. And we have to start practicing that too. The only people that benefit from us not having boundaries are the ones that benefited us from us not having boundaries. Like, and they're the only ones that have a problem with us setting them. So I think that learning that too, it may cause a few little tiffs and riffs and things here and there. But if we get really honest with ourselves, it might be relationships that needed to have a little bit of that inflection point anyway. It's just really scary to go, but right now I have 1,000 people that think I'm the greatest thing in the world, that always makes them feel understood, and I'm their spirit animal, and I'm their soul sister, and I get them better than anyone else does. And it's like, but I'm manipulating my way into being a chameleon for everyone in my life. And I don't even want to be that version of myself that they need to call on in those moments, you know?
Oh, and it's so funny because I've had these really devastating, like, few friendship breakups in the last few years. And the reason it happened is because of that exact scenario. I attracted people who were very, very wounded and who saw a need and like ability to come to me and know that I could stop everything in my life to try to help them and try to intellectualize and be their therapist and be the friend that they needed. And I wanted to give that to them. I wanted to create this safe space for them. It wasn't this like, you know, cruel, manipulative thing, but it got to a point where I would get so depleted and I would hold a simple boundary and be like, I'm not able to give this to you. And it ultimately blew up the friendships. And they were, you know, you're a mean girl, you're this. And it's so hurtful because you're trying to do everything in your power to not make that happen. And when you're a chronic people pleaser, I've never set boundaries before, and that's the reaction to setting a boundary. I was heartbroken. I was like, I'm never going to do this again. I'm a terrible person. How could I do this? This person needed me. Like, I was their savior, essentially. And I abandoned them, and I perpetuated this cycle of hurt by setting this boundary. And it's so complex. It's so complex, especially with women, because we're all so wounded and we're bringing so many narratives to these friendships. And if we're not able to sit with each other and be like, okay, this is how I'm reacting, rather than I need to cling to you and I need everything from you, it's codependency. And if we're not careful, we can repeat the codependency with our female relationships too. And it's so hurtful. It's so painful.
It is so painful and also so freeing. Sometimes even, it's maybe a few days down the road of setting that boundary that initially feels really confronting and scary. And oh my gosh, I'm bad. That inner child comes back out. I'm bad. I'm unlovable. All these truths about myself are coming to the surface again. But then the peace that happens when the boundary is held and when, again, confronting, the phone isn't ringing off the hook or the texts aren't being blown up or you're not attached to everyone else's issues all the time. There's so much freedom that comes in that. And the people that really do love and support you have the reaction that it sounds like your tiny army had of, thank God, like it was about time,
Yeah.
And all those people probably don't know the space you were actually holding for all of them. They really only know their experience. And if they could only know how much real estate was being taken up in your mind and your heart and emotions. But again, it's something else that I just think the more we learn, the more we're able to have softness with ourselves and those around us, but also a firmness in how we will be treated, how our time and space will be spent, and that it's okay to quiet the world around us and long enough to even just ask, what do I have space for? And if it's nothing right now, it's nothing right now, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think you're not bad if you need some space for yourself. You're not bad if you need a moment to just be a person,
Yeah, 100%. Wow. Oh my goodness. I feel like we could just keep talking and talking forever. I love this so much. I'm already going to start some questions and have you back on because I feel like this is just a conversation that it needs to happen. And it's so connected and universal in so many ways. And it's so nice to have somebody that in such a way I've admired and looked up to and have loved to follow your personal journey and your creative and professional journey. And also to understand why some of the people in my life are role models or are people I admire. And it's because there is this like string theory thread that has probably connected us in ways that feels like an exhale. It's such a beautiful thing when people that you believe are a certain way actually are. And that for me too is like, we always like to, again, the virality of saying this person isn't who they say they are, or this person's a fraud, or that I'm like, man, but when someone surprises you in a good way, let's talk about that. When someone is who it feels like they are to you, let's celebrate that, because I think it's just, it's the other half of the coin that maybe doesn't feel as great to talk about. It doesn't go as viral as talking about exposing someone, but it's so important.
Yeah, the good things need to be a little bit more viral. We all need that.
Yes. Let's make all the good news viral. I love that. Well, I would love to kind of close with, first of all, what your personal version of red nail energy feels like, the thing that makes you feel empowered and like you deserve a seat at any table.
That's tricky. I listened to your podcast today. I was hoping you would go into what the whole concept behind your red nail energy was. And I was super inspired by it. And we were so aligned with the first initial response that I had when I saw the name of it. And I think it goes back to, I have always alluded confidence and red nail energy to my physical body. And I feel like this whole podcast, we've just been talking about our disconnect from our physical body. And so to me, it sounds so silly saying it so simplistic, but since I've been a little kid, it was always like confidence means you're pretty, you feel pretty, the world thinks you're pretty, and you're confident with how the world perceives you. And I have never in my life felt that way. I have never in my life felt comfortable in my body in any sense whatsoever. I've done everything in my power to leave my body. And so the story my whole life became, I am not a confident person. I have no confidence. And I've carried that little story around the world with me. And just because I believed that confidence was being the loudest person in the room, was like turning heads, was speaking, being a good public speaker, not being afraid to take up space, not being afraid to take up your mind, not being awkward. I'm awkward. I'm so awkward. Like, I just always felt like I am not a confident person. And as women, the world conditions us to reach outside of ourselves for that confidence, right? Because it has to be connected to our physical body for the world to make money and for the world to keep going. And so we reach outside of ourselves. And this whole concept, I've been thinking about it so much because I've literally been deconstructing it for the last year. I started bleaching my hair at 14. Like, I didn't even have a choice. My mom's been bleaching her hair my whole life. And at 14, she said, you get to start bleaching your hair today. And it's just like this thing that we don't even realize we're doing. And we don't, we're reaching outside of ourselves to try to feel confident. But when my hair is bleached and I've got fake eyelashes on and a face full of makeup and I'm in uncomfortable heels and an uncomfortable outfit, like, and someone looks at me and they're like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. It's very conflicting because I'm like, I don't feel beautiful. I feel like I put on the mask that you wanted me to do. And now I'm standing here awkwardly presenting myself for the world and I'm checking off the boxes like you asked, but I still can't, what is confidence? I still can't find it. It's still not there. And so it's been this like ever eluding chase of like, where is confidence? And I do have confidence. I think I'm actually pretty insanely confident. It's just a very quiet, steady confidence. And there's so much alchemy and magic in my life that I have never until this moment been able to attribute to coming from me, because I carried around that story of I am not confident. But when I sit back and look at my life, I'm like, oh, there was no roadmap to get here. There was no one swooping in and catching me emotionally, financially, any of the ways. And I still put my head down and did it. That's what confidence is. And I am not the loudest person in a room. I will try to remain unseen because being seen feels unsafe still for me. There's all these layers to it, but I have this steady confidence that if I show up in a room full of strangers, I can make at least one person or several people in that room feel very seen and very safe. And that form of confidence is so important to me because I've never had anyone do that for me. I've only been able to do it for myself. Mm-hmm. So now that I can do it for other people, it feels very spiritual in a way, and I'm very protective over it. And it's just so interesting, the timing of this podcast, because with my physical body changes since my surgery, my confidence has plummeted even more, because again, it was this illusion of like, you are confident when you feel good in your body, and I don't feel good in my body anymore. So now I'm nothing. I'm no one. I don't deserve anything. I don't feel sexy. I don't feel empowered. I don't feel intelligent. And it's like, but why? It has nothing to do with my body. And so I've been deconstructing this whole concept of confidence for the last 8 months. And it's been so fascinating. And anyway, that was a very long-winded way of saying, I don't know. I think my red nail energy is being able to cliff jump, to just like not absorb other people's fear around me, put my blinders on and just say, I'm doing it. Like I've had the discomfort in my body my whole life. And it's very funny because the thing that I thought was unconfident me was actually allowing me to be confident, because I'm so used to the discomfort in my body that I'm like, I can be uncomfortable in all areas of my life. I can jump off the cliff and have no idea where my career is going to go. If I'm going to be able to pay my rent next month, I'm fine with that, because I've been uncomfortable in this body my whole life. Might as well add some discomfort to the rest of my life, like it's this very confusing, conflicting thing, but it's kind of fed itself, and here I am.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm hearing is you've actually learned how to find confidence without the mask that the world has told you is what's supposed to make you feel confident. And what a blessing to give yourself to be unapologetically who you are, and to actually be able to say, like, this is me with everything stripped away. I don't need to put the eyelashes on or the heels on or do the things that the world has told me make me beautiful. And it might take me a little bit longer to get there, but now I feel beautiful without any of those things. And that is just the greatest gift I think you could give to yourself, that then allows the inside to feel safe. It's funny, you said it has nothing to do with your body, and it almost has everything to do with your body and what it feels like to be inside of it. It doesn't have to do with how it looks to the outside world or how the outside world perceives it. but it has everything to do with saying like, I'm safe here. I'm home here. I don't have to leave you anymore. And I also don't have to paint you colors that I'm not interested in. I don't have to do these things to make you look pretty on the outside, because I'm actually finding comfort and home on the inside of it for maybe the first time ever, which is such a journey and such a place of safety that I don't think a lot of people even get to. And I think it often takes illness and rock bottom and all of these moments of trying to keep escaping and your body whispering like, come back, come back, come back.
Yeah, confidence is embodiment. That's what it is. And it was always fleeting, right? Like the reaching outside of yourself. Like when I would spend $500 to get my hair highlighted, or I would put on makeup, or like send a really hot picture of myself to a guy, it was always fleeting. It's these fleeting moments, and it keeps you needing more validation. It keeps you like searching for it in all these areas. And then you're depleted and you're like, but wait, what's left, And it's going to be a lifelong journey for sure. I mean, there are moments where I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, oh my God, I need my blonde hair back. Where's my blonde, shiny, like beautiful hair? I need it back. It's like, it's a lifelong journey. It's always going to be.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that it's such an interesting narrative of like the outer meshing with the inner, and then recognizing that once you find that level of confidence, it's not something that can be taken away or stripped from you. And it, a lot of those other things of like, I feel really good because I look really good, but when I wash my face, that feeling is gone. But figuring out what it is about the feeling that you can elicit and embody that can't be taken away is what, when someone walks in the room, it's an energetic you can feel, and it has nothing to do with what they look like. And there are days that I embody it, where I walk into a room and I know that I am exuding so much magnetism and high vibration, and everyone wants to be near me. And I know the days that it's, like you said, this lifelong process where I could walk into a room with my shoulders rounded and I'm looking at the ground and I'm hoping no one notices me. And both those versions exist within myself. And both those versions could exist with red nails. That's where it's like, it's not about the red nails, but for me, it was almost like I looked down and I was invited to come back into my body and be like, oh, I'm here. And this is reminding me in this very small way that became a very big way that I'm here, and I'm not scared to take up space, and I'm not scared to be seen. And I think that finding those small things become the big things that allow us to spend more days in that magnetic, energetic space than not.
Absolutely. And having those little things, there's nothing wrong with having those things. There's nothing wrong with painting your nails, or like putting on, a beautiful contour, or dyeing your hair and being like, I am feeling myself. Like if that is going to be the vehicle to get you to that place of embodiment and really like feeling empowered in your life, absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. And like, even with the way you carry yourself, I mean, I've noticed since my surgery, like I'm rounded in, I'm rounded down. My shoulders are rounded in. Like I'm trying to take up as less space as possible. And my boyfriend's always like constantly pushing me. He makes me stand in Superman stance every day and say like, I am healthy, I am strong, I am like, and it feels so insanely silly. But when I put myself in this stance, I realize like, oh, I am like this all day. I am shrinking all day. And if doing something physical, like standing there with your hands on your hips, or dyeing your hair, or painting your nails red, is going to be the vehicle to remind yourself how powerful you are, absolutely.
Do it every day, all day, unapologetic.
Every day.
Yes,
absolutely.
And women, please, for the love of all things holy, don't let it be another thing that divides us, where they're doing it in a way that doesn't relate and resonate with me. And it's like, let people find those things, and then let's celebrate that in each other, and let's push people to continue doing those things. If your friend looks amazing that day, like, don't be scared. Don't ever withhold a positive thought. I'm such a big believer in that. Like a stranger, your best friend, your mother, the people that are the hardest to hold space and love and celebrate, start practicing celebrating them. And that only raises all of our vibrations, and like does this small thing that heals something that is so desperately needing to be healed in the world.
Yes, especially the unseen things and the uncelebrated things. I think that's so important. So important.
So important. Okay, well, last thing here is, you've just been like such a wealth of inspiration and amazement to me already, but is there anything, and I'd love for it to be something intuitive that kind of comes to your mind or your heart, but that you would like to leave listeners with before we close?
Ooh, I think going with the concept of reaching outside of yourself for a multitude of things, for validation, for answers. I feel like I am at a point in my life where I am not sure where my next move is, right? And sometimes when we get very, very fearful and we start letting our fear take the driver's seat again, we start to look to other people to help us make our decisions because we're terrified of making the wrong one. And I think the greatest thing you can do for yourself is to not ask anyone's advice if they have not been where you are trying to go. I think I'm like this with my art too. I am at the point where I do not let anyone see pieces that I am in the middle of making besides a select 2 people, because I do not want their noise interjecting in my creative process. And that is, I think, a metaphor for our life. If you start asking people who are letting their fear run their life, hey, what should I do about this? Hey, should I leave my toxic relationship? Don't do it. Don't open yourself to that, because it's going to be painful and it's going to make your fear grow even bigger. And I think for some of the most painful moments in my life, I turned to the wrong people and I told them things that I shouldn't have. When I was leaving my fiance, I should have waited until I left to tell my parents, because I didn't. And I told them, and it was just a avalanche of, what are you thinking? Are you insane? You're going to be alone. You're not going to be able to make it work. You're not going to be able to pay your rent. It was all of my already internalized biggest fears being spoken back to me from another person. And that kept me there for so much longer. And there's been so many other instances in my life where I've gone to the wrong people for advice, or not even advice, but just told them what I was going to do before I did it. And it opens up counsel in your life to people that don't deserve a seat in your council. And I think a lot of this conversation has been about like being in our bodies, trusting our inner knowing, and coming home to that. And I think becoming your own counsel first and really sitting with that inner knowing when you're making decisions before going to every other place in the world is the most life-changing advice I've ever learned or been able to embody, because it's where your biggest, deepest, truthiest truth lies. And there's only a select few people in your life that should be able to be a part of that, but you should be the first one.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't relate more to that, and understand that means that we then are responsible for what those outcomes are. And it's a lot easier to put our future in someone else's hands so we can be mad if it's the wrong choice. But again, the amount of freedom that comes from trusting ourselves and knowing that we are worthy of trusting ourselves and doing it little by little. I mean, I've gotten to a point where it's like, where should I go to dinner? Here's these 2 options. It might be the most mundane, minute, small thing, but like recognizing the areas in our lives in which we don't trust ourselves to make a decision, and just starting small and maybe making a small decision, like you said, not telling anyone about it and feeling what that feels like. And it could be really juicy and liberating to know like, oh, I chose this and I didn't need 17 friends to consider and make sure that I get all of their opinions and all of their, peanut gallery thoughts when they're not living my life. And I would say on the inverse of that, if somebody does trust you to sit down with a really big truth that I'm sure it's taken a long time and a lot of courage to come up with, pausing for a moment before responding and maybe asking, are you seeking somebody just to listen, or are you seeking a solution, or would you like my advice? Because we often offer advice from a place of love, and we don't realize that what we could be doing is just burying someone in shame that has just spent months crawling their way out of it, and they finally got their head out and we just buried it back in.
Buried them back in. It's like the crab in a bucket syndrome, right? It's like if you are crabbing on the beach and you get 10 crabs and one crab tries to escape and climbs up the wall, the other crabs pull it back down. It's exactly what people do to one another. It's like their fear of, oh my God, you're going to be alone, or oh my God, you're going to leave your job, or that comes to the surface, and they want to pull you back down because they think they're saving you. They think that they're protecting you. It's not always a harmful thing. They think that they're being the good friend or the good mother or the good parent and saying, oh my God, are you insane? The world I can't protect you if you do that. And yeah, you just have to be wary and allow yourself to be the one in the driver's seat and making the decisions and feeling empowered about that. I love that.
I love that too. Well, where can listeners find you if they would like to connect with you and follow your writing and paintings, which everyone should?
Oh my gosh, thank you. If you want to subscribe to more of my writings, I do a newsletter called The Art of on Substack. And my painting work could be found at Rueter Creates on Instagram and TikTok. And then I also co-own a women's retreat company, and we host women's retreats all over the world. And we actually just launched our 11th retreat, and it's called the Uncelebrated Retreat. And it reminds me a lot of what we've been talking about, where we formulated a retreat around the sense of not feeling celebrated in our lives because we're not married, we don't have a baby, we don't have an engagement to celebrate. But what about all these other things? What about healing trauma? What about paying off debt? What about being divorced? Like, we want to hold space for women in these moments that feel uncelebrated. So that's something really cool. And that is at Ember and Solace Retreat.
Amazing. And all of those will be linked in the show notes. So feel free to hop over there. And yeah, I am so appreciative of you for being. And
this is so much fun.
Yes, so fun. More of this, please, universe. This is exactly the reason why I chose to do what I've done. So thank you for bringing that full circle for me.
You're doing an amazing job. I can't wait to listen to all these episodes. They're going to be so inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. And as always, Red Nail Energy listeners, you are not alone. You are more powerful than you could ever believe. And we love you so much. And we will catch you next week.
Hey.